Good morning. Today we will discuss about the nervous system. And the nervous system is a very complex and the broad chapter. So before going to start the nervous system, first let's see what is the objective and learning outcome of the nervous system. Now the objective of the nervous system is to identify the function and three overlapping function of the nervous systems. That means the structure of the CNS, structure of the PNS, division of the nervous system, naming a location of the paired segmental of the spinal nerves. The spinal cord is there. So all things that means about the central nervous system, about the peripheral nervous system. So we are going to discuss about the both components. After studying this topic, you will be able to understand the name the major division of the nervous system, both anatomical and functional. You can describe the functional and structural differences between these CNS and PNS and the gray matter and the white matter, different types of the neurons and their polarity you can explain. You can understand and explain the basic structure of the neurons and the glia cells of the CNS and PNS. Now come to the point. The nervous system regulates the body activities by responding rapidly using nerve impulse, action potential. Okay, so the endocrine system responds more slowly, though no less effectively, but by the releasing hormone. Now, the nervous system will regulate the body activities by responding the action potential. And action potential means the energy, the potential which comes in the actions. Okay, it will be the nerve impulse that propagated. So when the potential come into the actions, the performing the functions, and these are only possible by the nervous system. So nervous system will regulate the different body's activities. Okay, so the endocrine system respond more slowly and no less effectively by releasing the hormone. So there are the two things that can be regulate the body activity either by the nerve impulse, by the action potential, or by the endocrine. That means hormone releasing. While we know the hormone release, the chemical release are the much more slowly will work as compared to nerve impulse. While nerve impulse is electrical signals, okay, that moves that travel the fast as compared to the hormones that will be released, but their action will be not less effectively. Besides helping to maintain the homeostasis, the nervous system is also responsible for our perception, behavior, memories, initiating all the voluntary movement. So, nervous system will not only help to maintain the homeostasis, it will also responsible for our behavior, our thoughts, our perception, our memories. So, the branches of medical science that deal with the normal functioning and disorder of the nervous system is called the neurology. Neurology is a word derived from the two words neuro and logy. Neuro means nerves, or you can say nervous system. Logy means study of. So those medical science, the branches of those medical science which study about the nervous system is called the neurologist. And who is the expert of this? Yeah, you can say the physician who specializes in the diagnosis and treatment of the nervous system disorder will call neurologist. Now, the structure that make up the nervous system include the brain, cranial nerves, their branches, spinal cords, spinal nerves, their branches, ganglia, enteric plexus, and sensory receptor. So these all things will develop the nervous systems. Now, what is the function of the nervous system? What will be the function of the nervous system? Which type of function will carried out by the nervous system? So the nervous system carries out a complex areas of the task. It allows us to sense the various smells, produce the speech, and remember the past events. In addition, it provides signals that control the body, movement, and regulate the operational of internal organs. These diverse action can be grouped into the three basic functions: sensory, integrative, and motor. Okay. So the function of the nervous systems, either we can say it will allow to us to sense the various smell, it our speech that we can talk to each other, the past things that can be remember the any events or any editions or any episodes. So these all things, these all the activities can be categorized, yeah, can be processed into the three way: sensory, integrative, and motor. Now see how it will work. The sensory function: sensory receptor detect the internal stimuli such as increase in the blood acidity and external stimuli such as the raindrop landing on your arm. This sensory information is then carried into the brain and spinal cord through cranial and spinal nerves. Now, sensory function. How the sensory function will work? We have to understand that sensory function means inside the body or from the outside the body. There's some stimuli that stimulate some things, and it will be goes to brain. For example, if there is a raindrop, okay, when we move out and there is a raindrop on our hands, we can feel it, okay, because raindrop when landed on the on the hand, there is a receptor, the macromolecules is present on our skin, so that will take a sensation and give the signals towards the brain. Similarly inside into the body, when there is an increase in the blood acidity, you can see increase in the blood pressure, okay. So what will happen when the blood pressure in the blood vessel is going to increase, the stretch receptor is going to activate in the blood vessels. So when the stretch receptor will activate, it will give the signals towards the brain or motor center through the spinal cords or cranial nerves. Okay, so these are the sensory information then carried into the brain and the spinal cord through the cranial and spinal nerves. So the first function is the sensory function. That means we saying something. Now, after sensory function, there is a motor functions. What is the motor function? Our brain center, our command center. Once sensory information is integrated, the nervous system may elicit an appropriate motor response by activating the effector cells. It can be muscles, it can be glands through the cranial and spinal nerves. And then stimulation of the effector causes the muscles to contract and gland to secrete. For example, just one example we see earlier, when the blood pressure is going to increase, it will send the signals to the brain. Now brain is here act as a motor center. Now brain will command like the you can say um, it will give the response to the activating effector cells. And what is the effector organ here in this case motor function? In case this blood pressure, the affecting the activating the effector organs will be heart and blood vessels. Heart and blood vessels are the activating effector cells. Okay, so these are the effector. Now the brain will command the heart, kindly reduce your heart rate. So heart rate will be gonna down. So if the heart rate will be gonna down, blood pressure will be low. And second effector organ will be blood vessels. So it will brain will command to the blood vessels kindly dilate by releasing the some hormones, by releasing the some chemicals, by the by the nerve impulse. Brain will command to the blood vessels that you have to dilate it. So when the blood vessel will be dilate, blood flow will be down, blood pressure will be down. So the second function was the motor function. Now third one is the integrative function. We have to understand how the integrative function will work. The nervous system integrate, that means process the sensory information by analyzing and storing the sum of it and by making the decision for appropriate response. An important integrative function is the perception, what we feel. So the conscious awareness of the sensory stimuli and perception occurs in the brain. That will be the integrative functions. Now, nervous system can be divided into the two parts: peripheral nervous system and central nervous system. Then, now we will go one by one. So, when we divided the nervous system into the peripheral nervous system and central nervous system, then peripheral nervous system is divided into again autonomic and somatic nervous system. Autonomic again divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So, it is a part of the peripheral nervous system. Now come to the part central nervous system. Central nervous system is divided into brain and spinal cord. Okay. Now brain again going to divide it into the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrains. Forebrain again divided into telencephalon and diencephalon. Thus telencephalon divided into cerebral cortex, basal ganglia, hippocampus, and amygdala. These are the part of the telencephalon. Diencephalon having the thalamus and hypothalamus. Midbrain having the mesencephalon, and mesencephalon having the tectum and tegmentum. Hindbrain having the metencephalon and myelencephalon, and metencephalon having the pons and cerebellum, and myelencephalon having the medulla. So these are all the classification of the nervous system. Now come to the histology of the nervous tissue. Which type of the tissue is involved in the preparation of in the the composition of the nervous system? Nerve tissue consists of the two type of the cells. So all the nerve tissue, all the nervous system will consist of the two type of the tissue, the two type of the cells. That will be the neurons and neuroglia. So these are the only two things. Neurons and neuroglia are the hair that will compose the nervous system. Now, neurons provide the most of the unique function of the nervous system, such as sensing. So whatever we sense, whatever we think, remember, control the muscle activity, regulating the glandular secretion, these all things is gonna to happen by the neurons. That is the unique functions. While neuroglia is just act as a support, nourishment, and protect the neurons. Now you can understand both have been playing an important role. If neuron is playing into the sensation, thinking, remembering, controlling activity, regular glandular secretions will there. So if neuron want to be healthy, it must need the support of neuroglia. If neuron want to survive, it must need the support of neuroglia. So neuroglia is supporting the neuron, so neuron can perform their function. So you can see that both are the important function. Okay, so neuroglia will help will in the nourishment of the neurons, in the support of the neurons, and protect the neurons, and so it will maintain the homeostasis in the interstitial fluids that bathes them. So both are the dipped into the interstitial fluids. Now neurons, the first cell. Neurons, like the muscle cells, nerve cells possess, nerve cell, or you can say the neurons. So the nerve cells possess the electrical excitability and the ability to respond to a stimulus and convert it into an action potential. Okay, so what will they do, nerve cells? Nerve cell having the electrical excitability, and they have ability to respond to a stimulant and convert the electrical excitability into the action potential. How it can convert? Until the electrical excitability is not strong enough, it cannot be converted into the action potential. So if you want to convert the electrical potential or electrical excitability into the action potential, you must have get the strong stimulations. Okay, so nerve have the capability that will convert the stimulus to the action potential. If stimulus is not strong, if stimulus is very weak, so it cannot be converted to the action potential, not possible. So if the stimulus is sufficient strong, then it can convert the electrical excitability into the action potential, and when the action potential will be generated, then it will perform their functions. Now, what is the stimulus? We are saying again time to time the stimulus. Okay, so stimulus is nothing. It's just any changes in the environment that is strong enough to initiate an action potential. Any changes in the environment that is strong enough. For example, if there is a pressure in the blood vessels, or you can say the raindrops on your hand, and it is not strong enough to send the signals, that means cannot be action potential generated. And if it is enough and it is strong to send the signals, then it can generate action potential. So stimulus is any changes in the environment that is strong enough to initiate an action potential, that will be called the stimulus. An action potential is an electrical signal. Now, what is the action potential? Action potential is an electrical signals that propagate, that travel along the surface of the membrane of a neuron. So, any action potential, you can say the nerve impulse, is an electrical signals that will propagate, travel along the surface of the membranes of a neuron. So, that will be known as action potential. Now, neurons are the cells considered to be the basis of nerve tissue. So they are responsible for the electrical signals that communicate the information about the sensation and that produce the movement in response to those stimuli, along with inducing the thought process within the brain. An important part of the function of the neurons in their structure or shape. The three-dimensional shape of these cells make the immense member of the connections within the nervous system possible. Now, most of the neuron has three parts. If you see the structure, then you can figure it out. The neurons having the three parts: cell body, dendrites, and axon. So it have cell body, it have dendrites, and it have axon. Now the main part of neuron is the cell body, which is also known as the soma. Soma is also called the body. Okay, so neurons is divided into three parts. The first is cell body, second is dendrites, third is the axon. I will demonstrate. Okay, don't worry, I will show you some images and then I will explain also. So the main part of the neuron is the cell body, which is also known as soma. So the cell body contains the nucleus and most of the major organelles. We know the cell body is contains all the bodies of the neurons. So these bodies will contain the nucleus from where they can control all the activity of the neurons, and the major organelles will be present in the cell body. But what makes neuron special? Is it only the cell bodies can make the neuron special? No. They have a many extension of their cell membrane. These neurons, outer the two cell body, there is a cell membrane, and these membrane have a many extension, which are generally referred to as a process. Now, neurons are usually described as having one and only one axon, a nerve fiber that emerges from the cell body and project to the target cells. So axon, what is the axon? Axon is a fiber that is called the nerve fiber. So neuron usually described having one and one only one axon that is emerges from the cell body and projected to the target cell. So the neurons having one cell body, and the cell body outer membrane, that cell membrane, that plasma membrane, okay, having the many extension, and these extensions we call the dendrites. Second part, first body, second dendrites, and third axon. So body having the several extension of the membranes, so that membrane is called the dendrites. It will receive the signals from the several other cells. And third one is the axon. Axon, that means the emerges from the cell body and targeted to the other cells. Now, that signals axon can branch repeatedly to communicate with many target cells. Single axon, single axon that emerges from the cell body, it can be helped to communicate with the many different target cells. It is the axon that propagate the nerve impulse. Axon is the those part that will propagate the nerve impulse, and it will help in the communication to one or more cell. The other process of the neurons are the dendrites, which receive the information from the other neurons at a specialized area of the contact called the synapse. Synapse is there the gap between the two different cells, two different neurons. So the dendrites are usually highly branched process, providing the location of for the other neurons to communicate with the cell body. Information flow through a neuron from the dendrites across the cell body and down the axon. You will see the structure, then you will gain the more. Just wait for a few minutes. This gives the neurons a polarity, meaning the information flows in the one direction. Where the axon emerges from the cell body, there is a special region that will be called the referred as the axon hillock. It's a tapering of the cell body toward the axon fiber. Within the axon hillock, the cytoplasm changes to a solution of limited component that will be called the exoplasm. Thus, like this in the cell, there is a cytoplasm. In the axon, there is a exoplasm. Because the axon hillock represents the beginning of the axon, it is also referred to as the initial segment. So, what is the axon hillock? Axon hillock represents the beginning of the axon. So, where the axon will start, that will be called the axon hillock. It is also referred as the initial segment. The many axons are wrapped by an insulating substance that will be called the myelin. So all the axons are wrapped surrounding by something called the glial cells. So glial cells are the here that is uh, insulating the axons called the myelin or myelin sheath. Now, myelin act as an insulation, much like the plastic or rubber that is used to insulate the electrical wires. So, all the axon fibers are insulated by the myelin sheath, And a key difference between the myelin and the insulation on a wire is that there is a gap in the myelin covering of an axon. So when the myelin sheaths are wrapped surrounding the axons, there is a gap between the every myelin sheath. Each gap is called a node of Ranvier. So it's a node of Ranvier. And why it is important? Because the way that electrical signal travel down the axons. The length of the axon between the each gap, which is wrapped in myelin, is referred to as axon segment. So the length of the axon between the each gaps, that will be axon segment. At the end of the axon is the axon terminal, where the axon will be going to end, and the usually several branches extending toward the target cell, and each of which end is an enlarged called the synaptic end bulb. And these bulb are what makes that connection with the target cell at the synapse. These bulb can also contain the several types of the chemicals that will be released when there is a stimulation will be there. The site of communication between the two neurons or between the neurons and effector cell is called the synapse. So there is a communication, there is a site for the communication between the two neurons or neurons between cells. So there is a gap that is called the synapse. The tips of some axon terminals swell into the bulb cell structure called the synaptic end bulb. Other exhibit a string of swollen bulb called the varicocytes. Both synaptic end bulb and varicocytes contain many tiny membrane enclosed sac called synaptic vesicles that store the chemical neurotransmitter that will released when the time will comes. Now you can see here there is a cell body that is called soma. These cell bodies surrounding membrane, the outer membrane of the cell body is having the some extension part that is called the dendrites, and then you can see there's an axon that is emerging from the cell body, and this axon going to at the terminal end where the synapse will be there, some oligodendrocyte cells will be there, and this axon, you can say the axon fiber or the nerve fiber is wrapped by the myelin sheath, and there is a gap between the each myelin sheath that is called the node of Ranvier. And how it work, how the axon will work, as I explained the few one or two slide earlier. These dendrites that is present on the cell body, these dendrite will receive a signal from the other cells, from the other neurons. So these dendrites are act like a capturing the signals, and then the signals travel down with the help of cell body towards the axon fibers. Now these axon fibers are carry the signals to the down at the end of terminal, axon terminal. So there is a node of Ranvier and myelin sheath is there. So this node of Ranvier is helping to travel fast, to fast travel of the signals. And when signal will goes to the at the end of the terminal, there is a synapse. And I already told you, synapse is the site between the two neurons और बिटवीन दी न्यूरॉन्स एंड सेल्स, या तो दो न्यूरॉन्स के बीच में वो साइट है जो साइनप्स है, या तो फिर एक न्यूरॉन से दूसरा सेल है. सो इट कैन बी टारगेटेड सेल्स व्हेन द न्यूरॉन्स विल रिलीज द न्यूरोट्रांसमीटर, it will bind to the cell and produce the action. Or if between the neurons and neurons, so neurons will release the transmitter, and then transmitter will act as a signals, and that signal again captured by the other dendrites. So these dendrites go again to send the signal back toward the axon at the end of the terminal, and then it will goes to the target cell and produce the action. Now in this image, you can see clearly mentioned here that structure of a multipolar neuron, a neuron with a large cell body, several short dendrites, and a single long axon. You can see there is a nucleus in the cell body is there, and the different cell organelles is there. Cytoplasm in the cell bodies is there. Exoplasm in the axon is there. Dendrites is there. Then come to the below that will be called the axon. Axon having the different parts again. Exoplasm is there, and exoderma is there. Cytoplasm is also there because in the swan cell having cytoplasm, myelin sheath, and the neuroderma is there. Node of Ranvier is here, and come to the at the end, you can say the axon, terminal, and the synaptic end bulb. Though these synaptic end bulb, yeah, you can see the vesicle that will contains the neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitter are the chemical that will released through the neurons and transmit the signals to the other target cells. Now the classification of the neurons. Both structural and functional features are used to classify the various neurons in the body. Both structural and functional features. According to the structure, according to the feature, means according to the structure and according to the functions, we can classify the various neurons. So according to the structural classification, neuron can be classified according to the number of process extending from the cell body, like the multipolar neurons. Multipolar neuron usually having the several dendrites and one axon. Most neurons in the brain and spinal cord are of this type. So when you see the neurons of the brain and spinal cord, that will be the multipolar neuron. We are talking about the according to the structure. And in the structure, neuron classified according to the number of process of extending of from cell body, that will be dendrites. So in the multipolar neurons have several dendrites and one axon. So if there is any neurons who have the number of the dendrites and one axon, that will be called the multipolar neuron. Figure number 12.3a. Now you can see this is the figure a multipolar neuron. Multipolar neuron having the several dendrites and one axon. As you can see earlier, usually have several dendrites and one axon, and it will present in the brain and spinal cord. Cell body is there, dendrite is there, trigger zone is there, axon is there, myelin, all the structure will be same. Second is the bipolar neuron. Bipolar neuron have one main dendrites and one axon. Now see, bipolar neuron having the mainly only one main dendrites. We are talking about the not one dendrite. We are talking about the one main dendrite and one axon. And where it will found? It will found in the retina of the eye, inner ear, and the olfactory area of the brain. So those area of the brain that is responsible for smell, ear that is help to hear, and the retina of the eye. So these all are the location where the bipolar neuron will be found. And what is the property of the bipolar neuron? Bipolar neuron having one axon. Is it okay? Multipolar neuron also having one axon. But the difference between the multipolar and bipolar is that bipolar having the one main dendrites, while in the multipolar having the several dendrites. There is a not main, just several dendrites. But in the bipolar, one axon and one main dendrites. So you can see in the images, there is a cell body, and just above the cell body is the one main dendrite that is emerges from the cell membrane. Cell membrane having the only one extension, one dendrite, then this dendrite is gonna to divided into the several branches. So dendrite is only one main dendrites and then one axon. So that is the bipolar neuron. Third one is the unipolar neuron. Now you have to understand what is the structure of unipolar neuron. Unipolar neuron have the dendrites and one axon that are fused together. Dendrites and axon are fused together to form a continuous process that emerges from the cell body. So dendrites and axon both are fused together and continuously emerges from the cell body. मल्टीपोलर में क्या था, सेल बॉडी से एक तरफ डेंड्राइट निकल रहे हैं, दूसरी तरफ एक्सॉन. बाइपोलर में क्या है, सेल बॉडी से एक तरफ सिर्फ एक एक्सॉन निकल रहा है और एक डेंड्राइट्स निकल रहे हैं और एक एक्सॉन. बट इन द यूनिपोलर न्यूरॉन्स में क्या है, Unipolar neurons having the dendrites and axon are fused together and emerges from the cell bodies. See the structure, then you are able to understand. Unipolar neurons. Cell body is there, and from cell body, axon is there, and just axon above there is dendrites. So both are fused together and emerges from the cell body. These neurons are more appropriately called pseudo-unipolar neurons because they begin in the embryo as a bipolar neurons. These neurons are called pseudo-unipolar. Why? Because in the starting, in the begin, in the embryo as a bipolar neurons. During the development, the dendrite and axon are fused together and become a single process. After the development, then dendrites and axon are fused together and become a single process. Otherwise, in the embryo, it is also a bipolar neuron which have one main dendrites and one axon. The dendrite of most unipolar neurons function as a sensory receptor. They detect a sensory stimulus such as the touch, pressure, pain, or thermal stimuli. So unipolar will be involved in the sensation like the touch, pressure, pain, and thermal stimuli. Now to the come to the point quiz. So there's a different questions. You can see there is all 10 question is there. First question is which word correctly complete the statement? Like which word is correctly complete the statement? All motor neurons are what? Interneurons, bipolar neurons, multipolar neurons और unipolar neurons. कौन सा स्टेटमेंट इसमें सही है? That all motor neurons are. It is a interneurons or multineurons. Motor neuron that we mainly were talking about the brain and spinal cords. It is a multipolar. So yes, answer B is correct. Come to the point question number second. In the peripheral nervous system, which cells from the myelin sheath? Which cells form the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system? That means we are talking about the PNS. I already explained that nervous system is divided into two parts: central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system that will having the brain and spinal cord. Peripheral nervous systems that means having the autonomic and somatic. So which cell form the myelin sheath in PNS? First one, ependymal cell, Schwann cell, astrocyte, or oligodendrocytes. If you remember in the just last one or two slide earlier, I explained that the neurons having a axons, nerve fiber. These nerve fibers are insulated by a myelin sheath, and that myelin sheath is composed of Schwann cell. So if you remember the that points, then you can easily explain that myelin sheath formed by the Schwann cell. So answer B is correct here. Now question number third. What is the gap between the plasma membrane of a neuron? So listen carefully. Gap between the plasma membrane of a neuron that conduct an incoming signal and the cell that is going to receive the signal called. What will be called? What is the gap? There is a gap between the plasma membrane of a neurons that conduct an incoming signal. So there is an incoming signals and there is a plasma membrane and there is a gap and the cell that is going to receive a signals. So what will be the gap? Now come to the again earlier slide. When the dendrite will receive a signals, and after receiving the signal it will be passes through the axon, and when it will be passes through the axons, it will goes at the nerve terminal, and from the nerve terminal it will be processed to the next target cell. So there is a gap between the two neurons, or you can say between the one neurons and one cell. So cell is there receiving the signals, and neuron is there just sending the signals, or you can say releasing the signals. So what is the gap? So the same question is here. The neurons that conduct an incoming signals and the cell that is going to receive. So एक cell जो receive कर रहा है, दूसरा जो conduct कर रहा है, दे रहा है. So what is the name of the that gap between them? Remember what I told? It's a synaptic. Yes. Cleft. So answer C is correct. Next question. Which of the following substance cannot pass through the blood-brain barrier? Most important things. Which of the following substance cannot pass through the blood-brain barrier? So first know what is the blood-brain barrier. Blood-brain barrier is, you can say it's protecting blood vessels of the brain. So only those things can goes inside the brain who can cross this barrier. At this barrier however lipophilic in nature, so those lipid soluble substance can easily cross the brain, can easily cross the blood brain barrier and can go inside. Those who are not lipophilic, it cannot be able to cross. So which of the following substances cannot pass nahi kar sakta? For example, steroid hormone, oxygen molecules, alcohol, or potassium ions. Lots of the steroid hormone are there which are acting in the brain. So and it is also a steroid, it is also a lipophilic. So yes, it can cross. So ये नहीं हो सकता. Oxygen molecules, if oxygen not goes inside the brain, how the cell will survive? It is also incorrect. Alcohol, when you consume the alcohol, you know you have the lots of the symptoms. That means the alcohol is acting in the brain. But potassium ions cannot passes through the blood-brain barrier. So answer D is correct. What next question is, what name is given to the cell in the nervous system that produce the nerve impulses? What name is given to the cells in the nervous system that produces a nerve impulse? Which type of the cell is there in the nervous system जो nerve impulse produce कर रही है? Neurotransmitter is there. Neurotransmitter is the just transmit the signals towards the neurons. Nerve, we are talking about the nervous system, nerve tissue is there. Neurons or neuroglia? C, answer C, neurons. Neurons is the cells in the nervous system that produce the nerve impulse. Question number next. Which structure carries the incoming impulses toward the nerve cell body? Which structure? नर्व सेल बॉडी की तरफ कौन सा स्ट्रक्चर इंपल्स को ला रहा होता है? सो विच स्ट्रक्चर इनकमिंग द impulses toward the nerve cell body? First, axon hillock is there. What is the structure of what is the location of axon hillock? Axon hillock is the initial part of the axon, जहाँ पे axon cell body से emerge हो रहा है. तो axon potential, or you can say the impulse will goes travel down at the end of nerve terminal. So no, it is not carries to the cell body. Axon is there. Axon is carries the signals towards the nerve terminal. No, it is also not. Is there dendrite? Dendrite is just surrounding this. That means you can say extension of the cell membrane of the cell body. So when they receive the signals, signal will goes toward the cell body. So yes, C, dendrite. Dendrite is correct. So dendrite is receiving the signals and impulses and travel the impulses toward the cell body. So yes, answer C, that is dendrite is a correct answer. Which neurons are the unipolar? Which neurons are the unipolar? Again question now. Told you neurons having the multipolar, bipolar, unipolar. Unipolar are those neurons that have the dendrites and axon are fused together and they are emerges from the cell body. Neurons in the central nervous system? No, it is a multipolar. Neurons in the retina? Am I correct? Neuron in the retina? No, neuron in the retina is bipolar, which have one main dendrites and one axon. Sensory neuron is there, or motor neurons is there. Sensory neuron is there, like the when we can sense the touch, pressure, pain. So these are the sensory neuron that will the unipolar in nature. So answer C is correct. Which glial cells are responsible for forming the myelin sheath? Which glial cell are responsible for forming the myelin sheath around the peripheral nerve cell? कौन सी ग्लियल सेल है इसमें रिस्पॉन्सिबल है जो माइलिन शीथ बना रही है किसमें? पेरिफेरल नर्वस सिस्टम में. स्वान सेल अगेन. Okay, question are put it by a different ways but answer is same. Swan cell, no astrocyte, no satellite, no oligodendrocytes. These cell we will discuss later. What is the last part of a nerve cell that is involved when a nerve impulse pauses? Now listen very carefully. What is the last part of a nerve cell? Nerve cell का सबसे last part क्या होता है? That is involved when a nerve impulse passes to another cell. जब एक nerve impulse pass हो रहा होता है from one cell to another cell. So cell का सबसे last भाग का नाम क्या होता है? What is the last part of the nerve cells? It is a synaptic knob, axon hillock. From axon hillock, signal is going to the axon and then going to the terminal. So no, it is a not last part. Dendrites, from dendrite goes to the cell body, then goes to axon. It is also not axon is also not. So what is remaining? We have synaptic knob. Synaptic knob, that means you can say the varicocytes, or you can say the synaptic vessels is there. That is the end part, that is the last part of the nerve cell which carry the neurotransmitter and release the signal toward the another cell. So yes, answer A is correct. Now last question. We have the following statement is true of neuroglia. Which of the following statement is true of neuroglia? सबसे पहला क्या है? They are the cell that link motor neurons to the sensory neuron. क्या ये वो सेल है जो लिंक कर रही है मोटर न्यूरॉन को सेंसरी न्यूरॉन से? It is the non-cellular materials that lies between the neurons. न्यूरॉन्स के बीच में रहती है नॉन सेलुलर मटेरियल्स, ऐसा कुछ. They have only one dendrite and one axon. Is neuroglia is having like this structure, or they produce a myelin sheath? Which type of the following statement is true for the neuroglia? We know the neuroglia is the nerve cells that nourish the neurons, that protect the neurons, that support the neurons. So answer D is correct. They produce the myelin sheath, and by the myelin sheath, what will happen? By the myelin sheath, it is protecting the nerve fiber. It is protecting the axon. So yes, answer D is correct. So in this chapter, we studied about the how can we define nervous system, different composition of the nervous system, how is the composition of the nervous system, then classification of the nervous system. And we also have seen the most important tissue involved in the nervous system, that is neurons and neuroglia. Neuroglia we will discuss in further classes, but neurons we discussed today. So you have to go through these books, and you have to read well. You have to because there's the explanatory way that about the neurons explained. Okay, so you can understand about the neurons structure and their functions. You see here how the neuron will act, that neurons having the different classification according to their structure, according to their functions. So according to structure, it has the multipolar, bipolar, and unipolar. Multipolar property already seems that having the more dendrites, several dendrites, and one axon, that is a multipolar. Then you see the bipolar neuron is there. Bipolar neuron having the property like they have the one main dendrite and one axon. From the cell body, there's a one main dendrite arises, and then one main dendrite is going to further divided into several branches. Then the last one will be the unipolar. Now you have seen the unipolar having the that means dendrites and axons are both emerges fused together and emerges from the cell body, and the axon having also the axon terminal. So these are the best things that you learn in the neurons. Now you follow these reference book like the Tartora is here, that is the principal anatomy and physiology. You can just search Tartora, you will find. Bill Melinda is there, anatomy and physiology. Robin and Cottrons is there, pathological disease, basis of the disease. And because you know the nervous system is the system that will regulate all the activities of the body. So if the nervous system is fail, if nervous system is not going to perform the functions, that what will happen, you will see the number of the disease will develop. So you can also see the number of the diseases that will mentioned here in the Robinson Cutron. So you will understand about their pathological conditions is there. Like further you will see there is a different brain problem. Okay, like the Parkinson is here, Alzheimer is there. That is the mainly oldest patient, and you can see the cerebral hemorrhage is there, brain trauma is there, meningitis is there. That means the inflammation in the layer of the meninges, that is the brain protective layer having the meninges, and these when goes to inflamed, then you will see there is the different type of symptoms arises. Okay, so we will discuss later these things in the further chapter. But for today you have to just focus on the basic of the basic introduction of the nervous system, and about then neurons. So today thank you for patience listening. Then we will meet again in the next class and discuss the further topic. So till that, thank you so much.